Good map awareness means different things to different people. Some, when they think of that, may think of using a ward and then consistently looking at that vision of the ward to see if they're being ganked. That is partially good map awareness. Others may think of proper camera control, unlocking the camera, using F keys at the right times. That is also valid. Some may think of looking at the minimap in between last hitting, which is true, but I'll get into some issues with that line of thought. Regardless, what everyone can agree on is that improving your map awareness is always going to provide good value regardless of the champion or role that you play, because you need to know what's going on, gather as much information as you can so that you can do whatever decision you want to make with all of that information. The less information that you have, the harder it is to make a proper decision. One of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to advice for map awareness is using an interval timer. There are all kinds of timers on YouTube you can find for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 5 minutes, whatever it may be, that'll do a little beep whenever that interval finishes. A lot of people think this is great because that'll get them in the habit of looking at the minimap every time it beeps, which in theory could be helpful. However, the problem with this is that it's training you, one, to be reliant on that timer, but also it's not teaching you proper, fluid, intentional map awareness. It's purely because you're hearing the beep. Plus, the more you use this, the more likely you are to start tuning out the beep anyway, and so it's completely pointless. It's just going to start being annoying. Let's get into what does it actually mean to have good map awareness. There are two parts. You see important information that you need to see, and then you have the time to actually process that information. A lot of people skip out on the second part, but it's just as important. I don't care how fast you can move your camera or hit F keys like Faker. If you're not able to process the information like he does, it's useless for you. It's only detrimental because it's actually distracting you from what's in front of you because you're moving the camera all the time, but you're not really looking at anything. You're just doing it as a habit. So instead of trying to be like Faker immediately, be more realistic with your current skill level. Give yourself the proper time needed by using the windows provided to you in-game. Whether you're walking back to lane, walking back to your jungle camps, or in between your camps, as you're kiting, if you have a little bit of time because you don't have to specifically look at that camp while you're clearing it, that's always great too. Or maybe while you're laning, you just finished a trade, you've cleared the wave, and you don't really need to look at your opponent, so that's a good time to move your camera around or at least look at the mini-map, which better be in the bottom right. If you have it in the bottom left, there's something wrong with you. When you're looking for these windows, be very specific. An example of this with junglers is any kind of champion that spams an ability but doesn't actually have to look at the camp. Something like Evelynn, Zac, Hecarim. You don't necessarily have to be looking at the camp. Now, obviously, if you're in a position where you're actively kiting, then yes, that isn't important. But if you're at the edge of the range or you just started the camp, you don't always have to be clicking back and forth. You will have windows if you're looking for it. You also have to consider that when people are doing jungle clear timers on YouTube, they're not moving the camera at all because obviously they're trying to get it absolutely perfect. In your own games, your clears don't have to be absolutely perfect. They do need to be good to a degree. Obviously, you want your standards to still be high of your clear or your farming, whatever role you may be playing. But at the same time, you need to understand that you have to find the balance. You have to be collecting the information while also still doing your job well. Start looking for things in game that spark a reason to look at the minimap. An example of this is when you're in the loading screen or even in the middle of the game, you look at the enemy team and you see that they have stuff like Nocturne, Twisted Fate, Pyke, which are all pretty popular champions right now. If you have those kind of champions, you need to be looking a lot more often, especially when you're in a vulnerable position, such as you're trying to crash a wave, you're trying to invade the enemy jungler, or take a fight in the river. Those are definitely times where you need to be looking. But if you're just sitting under your turret, or you're farming your camps and you have plenty of vision around you, then it's not as big of a deal if you're not looking at the minimap as much. Always look at the context of when you're trying to look at the minimap. It should not just be at every 5 seconds. It should be, okay, I have an actual need to collect information, so I'm going to do that now. As soon as I have the information and have processed it, I'm going to go back to what I was doing until, once again, I need to collect more information. Another example of this is if you just had a team fight and all but one enemy is dead. Obviously, you don't need to look at the minimap that much because you know that you're not at risk of dying. But if it's fog everywhere, then you got to be a lot more careful. A lot of people struggle with minimap awareness when it comes to team fights. What you want to do is you want to look at the minimap as much as you can or move your camera around as much as you can before the fights start. That's your window to look. Once it really starts, people are engaging, trying to get out, whatever. You don't really have time to look at the map that much, unless you're really, really good and you've gotten much more comfortable without a team fight. If you're at that point, great, especially if you know the windows, but you probably don't need this video, to be honest, if you're already that good. So again, be realistic, get as much information as you can at the start of the fight, and if the fight gets a little bit slower, people are backing off, then you can use that window again to look and see if there's anything that you need to change throughout the fight. Maybe a couple people got caught, and so now you're looking around to see if you can maybe catch another enemy, or maybe you need to back off because your teammates got caught. Either way, collect as much information as you can, but don't compromise your ability to fight. This is super important. Tunnel visioning is not always a bad thing. It helps your mechanics greatly if you do it at the right times. As I've said all throughout this video, be patient. Work your way up instead of trying to do it all at once. Getting the muscle memory down for F keys or even unlocking the camera, if you haven't gotten that down yet, it takes a while. It takes a long time. You really got to put in the work to properly fix it. Don't just jump straight into ranked trying to do it if you don't have experience with it already. Play some norms, play some flex queue, whatever. And then once you feel like you've really gotten it down, then you can take it into solo queue.